It started with a letter. The kind of passive-aggressive note Karen loved to tape to doors in the dead of night. When I found it fluttering on my porch one morning, the words hit me like a slap. Unapproved private internet installation is a violation of HOA standards. Immediate disconnection required. Signed, of course, with her sprawling signature under the title, HOA President. I almost laughed. My private fiber line, installed legally with county permits, had nothing to do with the HOA. But Karen thrived on control. If she couldn't regulate it, she'd find a way to attack it. I crumpled the letter and tossed it, thinking that would be the end. But with Karen, nothing ever ends so easily. 2 days later, I came home to find a stranger crouched at my connection box, tools in hand, wires dangling. My heart raced. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I barked, storming across the lawn. The man flinched and stammered. "2 was told by the HOA to disconnect unauthorized service." And there she was, standing a few feet away with arms crossed, her round face glowing smug in the afternoon sun. Karen didn't even try to hide her grin. "You're stealing bandwidth from our community lines," she declared, her voice loud enough for neighbors to hear. "This is HOA property, and you can't just set up your own system." I nearly exploded right there. But instead I yanked out the county permit papers I kept tucked in my folder inside the garage. I slapped them against the technician's chest. "Read this. This line is legal, approved, and entirely private. If you touch it again, you're committing a crime." The poor man's eyes widened, and he backed away, muttering apologies before scrambling to his truck. Karen's smirk didn't fade, though. She sneered. "You think a piece of paper protects you? I can fine you into submission. This neighborhood follows my rules." That was the moment I knew this wasn't just an annoyance, it was war. I spent the night digging through every law, every statute, every HOA bylaw I could find. And what I discovered was a goldmine. Karen had no authority over utility services. In fact, any interference she attempted was not only invalid, but potentially criminal. The next morning, I made calls not just to my lawyer, but to the State Utilities Commission and the county sheriff's office. If Karen wanted a fight, I would bring her one on ground she couldn't control. The twist came quicker than I expected. That evening, as I sat at my desk, the lights flickered and my internet cut out. My stomach dropped. I ran outside, and there she was again, this time with 2 HOA lackeys by her side, fumbling with cutters at my junction box. Sparks flew as they severed cables they had no business touching. I shouted. Neighbors poured out of their houses. Phones raised to capture the scene. Karen, drenched in arrogance, turned to the cameras and shouted, "This man is violating community security. We are enforcing compliance." But she hadn't counted on who else was watching. Within minutes, a county utility inspector rolled up, summoned by the complaint I had filed just hours before. He stepped out, badge glinting, and surveyed the scene with a look of disbelief. "Who authorized you to tamper with licensed fiber infrastructure?" he demanded. Karen puffed up like a toad, waving her fake authority like a flag. "I am the HOA president. I have jurisdiction over all installations within this community." The inspector's voice cut her down instantly. "No, you don't. This line is private, state licensed, and federally protected under communication law. You just committed felony vandalism and obstruction of service." Gasps rippled through the gathering crowd. Karen's face drained of color, but still she sputtered excuses. "He's lying. He hacked the system. He's spying on us all. Her words grew wilder, her voice shriller, but no one was buying it anymore. I stood silent, letting the inspector and arriving deputies do their work. They photographed the damage, collected the cutters as evidence, and took statements from neighbors who had witnessed everything. Karen grew more frantic with every passing minute, her bluster unraveling into panic. "You can't do this to me," she shrieked as deputies stepped toward her. "I am protecting this neighborhood from corruption." But her protests were drowned by the sound of handcuffs clicking shut around her wrists. The queen of control, caught in her own trap, dragged toward a patrol car as cameras flashed and neighbors whispered. And in that moment, as rain began to fall lightly over the scene, I felt a quiet satisfaction settle deep in my chest. She had tried to cut me off, but instead she had severed her own power. What she didn't understand was that the internet she hated so much carried not just data, but truth, and the truth had finally connected every neighbor she had tried to keep isolated. The news of Karen's arrest spread through the neighborhood like wildfire, faster than any internet connection she had ever tried to cut. By dawn the next morning, phones buzzed with messages, group chats lit up, and social media feeds carried shaky videos of her shouting as deputies cuffed her. For years, she had been the face of control, the loud voice behind endless fines and ridiculous rules. But now she was just a woman with rain-slicked hair screaming into the night while neighbors filmed her downfall. But the real storm wasn't the one in the sky. It was the fallout that came when investigators dug deeper into the tangled mess of her self-proclaimed authority. The County Utilities Commission, furious at the sabotage of licensed fiber, filed charges within days. It wasn't just vandalism, it was a felony count of tampering with communications infrastructure. And because my private line had also been connected to remote medical monitoring systems for my father, who suffered from heart disease, prosecutors added reckless endangerment to the list. Karen hadn't just cut wires, she had cut a lifeline. The HOA board scrambled to distance themselves. At an emergency meeting, the vice president tried to claim Karen had acted alone. But neighbors weren't buying it. One by one, they stood and recounted how board members had enabled her for years, rubber stamping her fines and letting her run wild. A retired teacher, Mrs. Patel, rose from her chair, her voice trembling with fury. "You knew what she was doing. You let her bully us, harass us, even threaten our children. Don't you dare pretend you didn't know." The room erupted in applause, something I had never witnessed in those sterile meetings before. I didn't even have to raise my voice. The truth was out in the open, and Karen's allies were shrinking under the weight of it. But what shocked everyone was the twist that came next. A technician from the fiber company, a man named Rob, stepped forward holding a folder. He revealed that Karen had actually submitted forged documents weeks earlier, claiming to be community manager, authorized to regulate all internet service in the neighborhood. She had even attempted to reroute bulk billing into an HOA-controlled account, one that, conveniently, was under her sole access. It wasn't about rules, and it wasn't about aesthetics. It was about money, pure and simple. The fraud went deeper than anyone had imagined. When the sheriff's office executed a warrant at her home, they uncovered stacks of falsified compliance tickets she had been printing on her own computer. Some were old fines she had already collected but kept no record of. Others were fresh, ready to be served to anyone who crossed her next. The files on her laptop revealed she had been building a network of surveillance too, drafting plans to install cameras under the guise of neighborhood safety. In truth, she wanted to control what everyone did, from how long their porch lights stayed on to whether they streamed movies past midnight. Karen's fall from grace turned into a collapse of everything she had built. Neighbors who once muttered in private now spoke openly, fueled by the sight of her lies laid bare. One man admitted she had threatened foreclosure when he refused to pay a fine for hanging a flag on his porch. A young mother told how Karen had cornered her in tears for allowing her toddler's toys on the lawn. The more people spoke, the clearer the picture became. Karen had twisted the HOA into her own dictatorship, and now the dictatorship was ashes. The trial that followed was nothing short of theater. Karen strutted into the courtroom on the first day, still clinging to arrogance. Dressed not in orange, but in a blazer she insisted on wearing despite the deputy's orders. She tried to fire her lawyer in front of the judge, shouting that she would represent herself because no one understood HOA law better than her. The judge, unimpressed, forced her to keep counsel. Each time the prosecutor presented evidence emails, video clips, financial statements, Karen interrupted, her voice shrill and panicked. Lies. All lies. This is a conspiracy to silence strong leadership. She cried, but her words only made the jury lean further away from her. And then came the most devastating testimony, my father's doctor. He explained calmly how the interruption of the monitoring system could have cost my father his life if not restored quickly. The courtroom went silent as the gravity of her actions settled over everyone. Karen, who had once bragged about protecting the neighborhood, had nearly killed a man in her quest for power. Even her own family, sitting stiffly in the back row, lowered their heads. When the jury finally returned, the verdict was swift and unanimous, guilty on all counts. The judge's sentence was sharper than Karen's own tongue had ever been. You wielded false power like a weapon, he said, his gavel poised. You endangered lives, defrauded your neighbors, and defiled the trust placed in you. This community deserves better, and you will face the consequences. With that, he sentenced her to 6 years in prison, with additional fines that stripped her of the money she had hoarded from her fabricated tickets. The gavel fell, and Karen collapsed into her chair, sobbing not with remorse, but with fury at losing the throne she had built from lies. The neighborhood changed overnight. The HOA dissolved under legal pressure, its accounts seized and its bylaws declared invalid. In its place, a community council rose, not a board of enforcers, but a circle of neighbors who voted together. Meetings were filled with laughter, not dread. Children played outside again, without fear of notes being taped to their doors. The fences Karen had demanded be uniform now bloomed with color and individuality. Even the air felt lighter, as though her absence had cleared the storm that had hung over us for years. For me, the most profound moment came weeks later when the fiber company returned to repair the damage. The technician, Rob, shook my hand firmly. You stood up when she tried to control the uncontrollable, he said. Most people back down when bullies get loud. But you didn't. You saved more than your internet. You saved the principle that people can live free of her kind of control. His words stayed with me long after the cables were restored, long after the lights on my modem blinked back to life. The neighbors surprised me with a gift not long after. One evening, I stepped outside to find them gathered at the edge of my lawn, holding a wooden sign they had made together. In bold letters, carved and painted by hand, it read, "Connection belongs to the people." They planted it firmly by the junction box Karen had once tried to destroy. A permanent reminder that no one, not even an HOA president drunk on power, could sever the bond of community. As I watched them smile, watched the children chase fireflies in the dusk without fear of being scolded, I realized something deeper. Karen had tried to ban the internet, but what she really hated was connection itself, neighbors talking, sharing, supporting one another without her in the middle. And in trying to sever that, she had forced us to connect in ways she never could have imagined. So now I ask you, the one reading this, when arrogance tries to cut your lines, when entitlement tries to disconnect your freedom, do you let it happen quietly or do you stand? Fight back and show that true connection can't be controlled, only protected.